Our friend Dolphus Ramser was born and raised in Concord, North Carolina, a town so rich with history that it provided the inspiration for his independent record label and management company. So great was the city's influence on Ramser that he continues to live and work in Concord today, with a full-time staff located in both North Carolina and California. He and his team always put their clients' music first, work as hard as they can, and have fun along the way. Visit Ramser.com to learn more.
Welcome to The Road to Now. Today we have a really special episode. Ben and I are on the Avett Brothers tour bus, and every morning Scott, Seth, Joe, and I have this little ritual where we all kind of wake up at our own time. Seth wakes up first, and he's out here reading quietly or writing, and then slowly maybe I get up next and just kind of stumble out, and then Scott gets up, and then Joe gets up, and we all have coffee and we talk, and often the conversation leads into politics or religion or something. But we've always kind of joked amongst ourselves that'd be fun to have a morning coffee show where we just drink coffee. We don't play any music. And so that's kind of what this grew out of. We're just going to have a conversation. We hope you enjoy it. We'd like to thank Joe, Scott, and Seth for being a part of it today. And it's just going to be a potpourri of different topics.
A potpourri. That's the best way to sell it. The link between creativity and madness, the link between creativity and like bravado, and just the sense that historic figures, oftentimes the ones that are the most heroic, have these flaws in them. And sometimes those flaws make them amazing, right? In the fact that they can't just go to bed at night and feel fine about what they're doing, even though everyone else sees them as doing fine. So I don't know. When you think back about these figures, like, are there any themes when you think about, like, because obviously you're people who you're creative. You guys are doing great. You're making your living by it. Do you feel that yourself?
I mean, I had an issue last night. I mean, from kind of the whole evening. So, and what it leads me to is, and this is jumping over a lot of information, but the ending point is that sincere mutual relationships of love and respect and thought are and must be riddled with deceit and envy and selfishness and desire, painful desire, crippling desire. And those things are all wrapped up in Caravaggio and Tolstoy and me and Seth, and possibly our relationship with strangers that indulge in what we do. But that's what a truly loving, mutual, thoughtful relationship has to have in it. It doesn't mean it's bad. That a relationship between an artist and his art or her art that is hunky-dory, peachy, full of the smell of potpourri, is it's not real. It actually doesn't exist. And so I think that's where you separate the creators from the propped up entertainers or the propped up, I'm saying the false idols, the false celebrities that get propped up, and they get left out to dry because the insecurities fill them, but they're lifted on high to be basically worshipped. Where the creators are the ones that have these, all that, the Robin Williams, the Kurt Cobains, the Chris Cornells, the Tolstoys, the Caravaggios. Judd Apatow talked about it a little bit with us. You know how Willie Nelson in Yesterday's Wine, is it Yesterday's Wine or is it Phases and Stages, where he's talking about imperfect man coming down to
Yesterday's Wine.
Yeah, Yesterday's Wine. Like, that's the real, that's the real saint of our time. I kind of feel like the heroes are just, they're going to be flawed. They have to be flawed for us to get a real bead, a real sincere bead on that. And the ones that are chasing that muse is real dangerous because it takes us over and lays waste to a lot of folks and a lot of love around us. So I don't know if that makes sense.
Does Tolstoy? I haven't read What Is Art. You've read it a few times. Does Tolstoy get into that at all?
Well, I think Tolstoy at 50 or whenever he was at the age 50, 52, when he honestly denounced everything before then, in turn denounced pretty much any other fiction writer. He kind of, just went after, I think, the institution, the art, the institution of art and creativity outside of spiritual. I think when he did that, that was his, right? That was his sort of reaction to, okay, I'm disgusting. I'm a disgusting being, and the only reason I wrote War and Peace was so I could be praised.
This got this great quote from Tolstoy that I read, and it's a quote: "I put men to death in war. I fought duels to slay others. I lost at cards, wasted the substance wrung from the sweat of peasants, punished the latter cruelly, rioted with loose women, and deceived men. Lying, robbery, adultery of all kinds, drunkenness, violence, and murder, all were committed by me, not one crime omitted, and yet I was not the less considered by my equals to be a comparatively moral man. Such was my life for 10 years. That is a confession.
So that's either out of a confession or it's out of Kingdom of God's Within You. It's one of those. It's in one of those books. Yeah, it's one of the two. I'm pretty sure it's in a confession. And that's the book that he was saying, okay, so here's the deal.
It's also dark. It's also so dark and rooted in our own self-evaluation and our own obsession with ourselves, Like, where's the fun? If you look at Romeo and Juliet, or look at, even though a lot of Kurt Cobain's lyrics were abstract and sort of a collage work, there's just such enthusiasm and such excitement and such fire, Like, is that all to be just ignored so we can just sit and feel horrible about being humans, There's a lot of that in Tolstoy. There's a lot of wisdom in Tolstoy, but there's a lot of poetry even in all the stuff where he's talking, against poetry. He can't really get away from it because he's a poet. He's talking, like, when he talks about our souls and talks about Christ and talks about this life and being disgusted with himself and commerce and politics and everything else, he also is like writing poetry. It's kind of an odd sort of contradiction happening there.
Yeah, he says before he was just trying to be the perfect human, that there was just this chase. Him and his friends were just who could be the perfect human in health and in creativity and in accomplishment. But he continued to perfect and dial in his self, like he did. Like, well, that's why we're talking about him. So it's
right, because if you're your gross ambition to become the greatest fictional writer, it's not like the gross ambition just disappears when you're looking to be the greatest authority on philosophy and religion and everything afterward. There's some similarities.
It seems like if you're driven, when you accomplish the thing that you were inspired to do, at least it's been my experience, when you accomplish it, the fact that you could accomplish it means that it must not have been that big of a deal. You know what I'm saying? So, like, what's the next thing? Like, I don't know if it ever stops.
Right.
I don't think it ever stops.
It's a blessing and a curse. Like, oftentimes our strongest suit, and this is actually from Don Fortson's lecture on.
Yes, I love this. I love this line. It's essentially, and I think Neil Young parrots it in one of his songs, that basically the thing that your greatest asset becomes your greatest element to destroy yourself. They're one and the same. They're both of the same.
This is a sad conversation, guys.
No,
let's keep it going, man.
It's not.
Let's keep it going.
It's not sad. It's not sad. It's all about where it's about what you just said about where does it go, where, like, because you have to see, we're all still very childlike in the way we dream, and that I believe is important for children, which that's the most important thing. Like, how early does a kid get his or her dreams hosed, and doused, those flames. They get early a lot of times through either family life, lack of family life, through someone harnessing one of their talents and pulling them along and disregarding what their actual spirit is probably calling for. And so I think that we all are endless dreamers, and that's the positive and playful part of it. But it's about, okay, how do you make it where those accomplishments don't own you? Because if you're trying to accomplish them or expecting them to be accomplishments, then they completely own you. Just take the idea of them being accomplishments out of the picture, and that they're just ongoing conversation with this dream. But you have to start realizing that you can't have that conversation without acknowledging whether or not you believe in something spiritual, because if it's just a dream, it will just die with you. I mean, you can pass it to other people, but it's going to eventually die with people. And I don't think that's on the highest level of translation to children. When you're translating dreams to them, when you're transferring dreams to them, they have to know that it's going through and beyond forever. And that's where God comes in, I think.
Does this all lead to where Tom Shadyac got to in his life, where he was this incredibly successful film producer and director, and he did many of those great Jim Carrey films of the 90s, and he had owned four homes in California and around the world, and then he had a biking accident where he severely injured his brain, and it sent him on this journey to find out, what is happiness, what is truth. And he left California, sold his houses. He sold his houses and bought a trailer, lived in a trailer for a while in Malibu, but a trailer nonetheless, and then sold that, and he moved to Memphis, Tennessee. He bought a building down there by the old Stax Records, and he works with inner city youth. And now he's bringing films into Memphis, and a major part of the crew are these kids that he's been working with. He started a radio station that the kids run. Is that kind of where all this leads to, like this success?
A life of service.
Does it lead to service, Joe?
I mean, I don't know if everyone's path leads to service, but I'd say, like, in terms of fulfillment, the life of service seems to be where you see a lot of people going towards. I know that I feel personally the happiest when I am doing something for someone else. But I mean, that also could equate to playing a show, right? Because that question of, are we playing a show for other people or are we playing for ourselves? I don't know. What do you think? Do you play for other people or do you play for yourself?
Well, sometimes I play for other people. Sometimes I play for myself, It's a mood thing, right? It's like, how do you get out of your personal mood? Like, whatever's going on, how do you separate as a performer? That there's different kinds of art, and as like Joe, I'd say what you and I do is performance art, right? For the most part, more so. And how do you separate what's going on at home or what's going on the bus when you take that stage and leave yourself an empty vessel for the music to fill? Like that's the goal for me, and that happens. It happens. Some nights I'm waiting for it, right? I think I've gotten better over the years, especially going through with Hallie, because after Hallie, I came back after Hallie's illness, and I didn't hate what we did. I felt that I was the wrong person to be in the middle of a celebration, essentially. And I found myself thinking a lot of negative thoughts on stage, or feeling unconfident, like after not playing for a year, feeling very, very, very afraid to make a mistake. And then I made lots of mistakes because I was afraid of making any mistakes. And what pulled me out of that were letters. I got some letters from fans saying, I have a brain tumor. I went to the show last night. It meant so much to have you up there and representing, and those kinds of things made me realize, okay, I need to try to take this out of myself. Like, get over yourself kind of a thing. And so one tactic I've developed is when I'm starting to think about myself on stage or feel myself on stage is just kind of like mentally stop and slow down and just start again. Like kind of like empty yourself and then try to let the music fill it. But it's not
It's like a meditation almost.
It's a meditation, yeah, and it's not a it's definitely not 100%. It's a struggle. Like how do you empty yourself when you have people, thousands of people cheering you, saying your name, like people saying like, "I love you, Scott. I love you, Seth. I love you, Joe." Like how do you take that, like not let it go to the wrong part of your soul, which corrupts your soul.
Well, maybe some of them do go to the wrong part of your soul, but I can only speak for myself. I feel like we've been overwhelmed with stories. It's an impossibility to ignore all the stories. So now, I don't know when this happened, but I think it morphed over the years. But it's turned from early on. I feel like it was 100% wanting to show off, like almost all the way. And when there was no one in the room, it was like, what can I do to impress or make people have some kind of reaction where they think that I'm awesome, or think that I'm valuable. And then at some point, through all these experiences and meeting all these thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people, and some fraction of them have offered their story, and everybody's story has struggle and tragedy, And so now I'm sure I'm sure the 100% isn't down to 0%, but I'm sure it's way down, because now what I feel each night when we're going out is I try to feel it just enough to where I can acknowledge it, and not let it consume me. But if you're in the room or the arena or whatever, and there's 4,000 people in front of you, the likelihood is that most, if not all of them, are there with something heavy in their heart, And it's a blessing. It really is, to be able to try to offer some sort of respite, some sort of moment away from it. And I think it's good for people to see people on stage having a good time. I think it's good for people to see people on stage presenting some sort of message of love, which I think that we on the whole do. So I feel like it's a good job, a good job that we have. And when people say that they love us, I think that you have to take it as there's a lot of different kinds of love. You have a different kind of love for your wife than you do for your cat. And the way I love Kurt Cobain is not the way that I love you, Bob. Because I didn't know him in person, but I love that he was here and love what he did. But there was a time when it was really just about showing off, and I feel like now I'm at least much more aware that there is a camaraderie and a communion among us.
We were just in Memphis last night, and we met a young man who's dealing with cancer. He's a St. Jude patient, and I find this in my personal life. I go back with my daughter every 6 months, and every time I walk into that hospital, there's this feeling of there's like anxiety going there, but then I walk in and there's this like feeling of just comfort and peace, and I see all these amazing parents with their kids, and I see the kids who are amazing, and it just resets me. It just like puts me in my place in the best possible way. Like the father who's got the child, who's just in a really bad way, and has the best attitude with that child, and is like, treating him like the sky's the limit, even though what on paper is a death sentence, and being able to translate joy in that situation, when I've seen so many parents do that, or the child who as a result of these diseases, like Hallie lost the right side of her brain, so she's got major disabilities. But I've seen parents with their children who are so disabled and so challenged, and just I look at these parents like they are the rock stars. Like, that's who I want to be. That's the attitude I want to have. And here I am, successful successful musician, and I just feel like I don't measure up to what the meaningful measuring stick, right? The measuring stick that counts, that's those people. And so being in Memphis resets me in that way, and meeting the young man we met last night, it just fills you up in the right way. It just fills you up in the right way. It shrinks you and grows you at the same time.
It probably bears mentioning earlier about what you were saying, Ben, that like, whatever you achieve or whatever good thing you do, you I don't know, like somehow you figure out a way to minimize it or make it smaller. And you got Bob sitting here talking about how these other people are the heroes, and like Bob and Melanie have done, like with Hallie, their whole family have done something that's like singular and, I mean, impressive beyond words of anyone I know. And he's bringing it down to a smaller level. It's just there's something to that.
It also goes back to what we talked to about like how people's greatest strength can also become their greatest weakness, right? Bob Crawford's humility.
Yeah, it's killing him.
It's more.
No, I love it. It's like when I have the students that are about to murder them, like about to die because they won't sleep because they keep on studying, right? And they're and they're gonna be fine, right?
Right.
I'm like torn. Do I tell them they're gonna be fine,
Or just
right?
like
Or just go, okay, this is working for you, right? Like,
just keep
when
doing
I see
it.
Bob, I'm like, you're killing it, man. You can't. You gotta believe in yourself. Like, I know it's an honor to work with Bob.
We just did an episode about Martin Luther, and he would, when he had his conversion, he was in the monastery, and he would go to his confessor and just like confess for hours, and the guy'd be like, "Dude, just go go commit a real sin and come back." He just never felt like he got it right. I don't
Like,
compare myself to that.
Just say half a Hail Mary and just just go ahead.
No,
you're not really doing anything that bad.
We all know here that's not my case, but
It's like you don't need to say like a Hail Mary. Maybe just like, could you sing like 2 verses of Mary Had a Little Lamb? That should do it. Like, that should do it.
Hey, Road to Now listeners, producer Ian Scotta here. We would like to announce the launch of our own Patreon account. Get more info at theroadtonow.com/support. Here now are Bob Crawford and Dr. Ben Sawyer.
I'm Ben Sawyer.
I'm Bob Crawford.
And this is The Road to Now. And we, first of all, thank you so much for the support that you've given us over time. We want to make more things. We've heard from a lot of you who have given us great topics, and the cost of editing and things like that are high, and we want to make more things for you, but we also are going to ask for your support in doing that.
Yeah, I think a few of you have written in and said you wanted to support in some way, so we've come up with a few ways that you can support us, and the best part is you get things in return.
That's right. We will give you back extra episodes. We will give you some of the swag we're making, the t-shirts. We've had multiple people write to us and ask us if we would set up something so that you guys could help us support the podcast. That's insane. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've got t-shirts in the making, hats, coffee mugs, these really cool coffee mugs.
We've been trying to clone Ian. It hasn't worked yet.
Yes.
$500 more. The guy promises us that it's going to work.
But there'll be extra content along with that, depending on what level you want to participate and join us here as a member of the Road to Now.
That's right. And so we just really thank you for doing this, for your support, and we look forward to making even more great content for you guys. I'm lucky in the sense that like I started a comedy game show, and we did it at a club by ourselves for a year, and then it got picked up by Zanies. So like they picked it up and they put support behind it, and so now when they open a new club, like now I've got it in 2 clubs, and like the end goal is like to be able to essentially like set it up at different clubs. The drawback to doing comedy when you're in your late 30s, I started when I was like 34. It's that like I was listening to a writer show with like 2 writers who wrote a bunch of like the English shows. I think they wrote on like The Original Office and everything, and they were like making the point like stand-up comedy is a young man's game because you got nothing to lose at that point. And it's like I have the same thing. Like I go up on stage and I think of jokes, and I'm like, I can't say that joke.
Right.
I got a job. Like people know who I am. Like
I have a son.
Right. And he says, so you can't write. It's hard to be a good stand-up whenever you're in your 30s, but it's hard to write a sitcom before you're 40 because you got to write different characters. and you've been different characters when you're 40.
Right.
When you're 22, you're still not even sure which character you are at that point.
Right.
40, man, like think about how many people you've been, and you can see the world through those eyes a lot easier.
Right.
So
Yeah, in the book, How to Write Your Script in 21 Days, Jennifer, Seth's wife, gave it to me when I was working on a script. And it was painful how perfectly we all fit in these brackets of ages and what we write about and what we talk about and what we relate to. And like the 39 to 43 was a spot, and it said exactly what, if you write a script in this age, this is what it'll more or less be like. If you write one when you're 24, this is what it's like. This is how you view it. And I was going, oh, this isn't going to be, there's no way they've nailed this. And I'm reading through it going, this is spot on.
you want to create characters in a scenario, and you find out that you're actually a character in the scenario.
Well, definitely. Totally. Spot on. I think almost all are that way, yeah.
But that's why I started doing stand up, was because I was looking around, like I was trying to learn how to write scripts. I had no clue how to do it, and I got all these books when I was living in Moscow, and like they disagreed on like how to write. Like I basically just want to write a sitcom, right? But like they all said like whatever, if you want to write a sitcom, whatever your philosophy is, whatever you follow, all of them agreed you got to do stand up for a while, because it teaches you punch, it teaches you economy of words, feedback, voice, and all those things. And so I was like, for the first like 6 months, 8 months, I'm just doing this to learn how to write scripts. And then I realized that I felt really bad when I didn't do well and good when I did. Here I am, 5 years.
This is all perfect, by the way. We're using all this stuff.
And by the way, that's why you guys invited me to be on this podcast, because of the reputation I've built as a stand-up comic.
It's like Ric Flair. He would have famous people come on his show to interview him. So that's good. So that's actually what we're doing here. We're here with the Avett Brothers to talk about Ben.
Yeah. Let's talk about the person in this room you care about the least, even the listeners to the podcast. Scott, I was thinking about like music's changed a ton, like in the last like 20 years, and I had like been thinking about like how technology's changed, right, and just how like it still takes 10 years, right, but the elements, the work that goes into it, it's just not the same, right? We talked about this with Chris Freites as well, and it was just like thinking about, I was like, oh man, I was like, that's because Chris Freites is a reporter. He graduated from college the same year we did, but how insane it is, the skill set, right? That you have to record. And I was just like, it made me laugh, because I was like, yeah, I know what Seth's first experience in the studio was, because I was there,
right?
And it's like, it's kind of weird to like relive that stuff when you're later on, you're like, that stuff happens, but then you're just like, dude, yeah, like I remember what it was like going in there. Like we drove down to Myrtle Beach, right? We spent $1,000 to record 4 songs.
Yeah, 23 years ago.
Yeah, and like it was, and we had to get the different tape. What were they called? The old tapes that you had.
ADAT tapes.
Yeah,
the ones that were
ADAT
big
tapes.
as VHS tapes.
We ordered like 500. It was thousands of dollars. We worked, like me, you and Noah worked all summer to save up money. In 1995.
94,
95, yeah. And like now, like a kid could record, like just sit down and record, like in his room, like
GarageBand
with
or
a
whatever.
computer,
Or
on this. As a matter of fact,
phone.
we made a joke earlier about like these Zoom H6s, and like how Seth bought a 4-track, like in high school, and we were all just like, oh God, if we could just get a hold of that. Like if we could just get a hold of it for one night. Like everybody was like on Seth about that.
The 4-track.
4-track.
Just the 4-track.
It would turn a 60-minute tape, because it would record 4 tracks, turn it into like 10 minutes. You just had to hustle to get it on there.
Yeah, here's my first thought about this. What's the question? I don't want to interrupt
The
you.
question is like, how does that like change the skill set you need to be a musician?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, we've been talking about the whole technology thing just on a larger level about what it's done to our culture, but a lot. But the first thing that comes to mind with that is that it's done a similar thing that's happened with the photographic image, which it's just it's like anything, like any market. If there's a lot of something, it becomes less valuable. So now that there's billions upon billions upon billions of pictures shared all the time, photographs just aren't really that important anymore. It's a weird thing. Like we've seen that in the last like 5-10 years. Like and working all summer and saving all every penny we could get our hands on to go to a studio in Myrtle Beach and record 4 songs and put everything into getting cassettes mass produced. I'm making the quote marks right now. I don't know how we got a couple hundred or whatever it was. That lended some weight to the project. Like it made us really try hard, and really, we're now, you can just sort of turn the phone on and push the red button and you can make a recording. It kind of takes, I don't know, it makes it to where the thing that you're recording doesn't have to be something that you've thought about a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, I remember like I think we sold like a couple hundred copies of those tapes, and
Yeah.
we were just like, oh my god, like we had to order a second box. It's like what? Like if you posted your song on like YouTube or Apple Music, and after a year you had 500 plays, you'd be
Right.
like, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Like how the market meant so much more.
Right,
Like,
but when we had to order that second shoebox of tapes, it was like, this is huge.
it's quality because they ship it in a shoebox.
That's right. In an old Asics, shoebox.
$400 shipping because it was cassettes. Like I was just thinking about like how it was like we never ordered CDs, and I was like, oh yeah, that was the weird period where CDs were more expensive than tapes.
Right.
Even though tapes are like a mechanism.
Right.
Somebody in a factory has to put together a tape.
And a
right?
CD is a piece of plastic.
So CDs were like still
Literally.
people are like, I don't know, man. Like not everybody has CD players. I don't know if it's worth
Space
it.
age.
Like the economy right now, I'm not sure people can afford the CDs. But it's just like, but now like how? Because I never had the patience for recording. You may have noticed that.
I tried to trick my parents into getting me a CD player for Christmas one year. I went and bought a few CDs. And then LL Cool J, the one with I Need Love, that one. I can't remember what it's called. It's before the one with Jinglin' Baby and Around the Way Girl. But the one before that, Walk Like a Panther. But it was was it Walk with a Panther? Anyway, regardless of that, look it up. I bought that CD, and then The Alarm, the band The Alarm, I bought their CD, and I went home, and I was like, showed my parents, I was like, look at this. These are CDs. Do you think I get a
Now
CD?
go out and buy me a $600 single deck CD player.
They were like, great, you
They
also
were
got a
so
gallon of
mad.
gas out there.
They
We're going
were-
to get your car now, asshole. Like,
My ploy, which is like, I could see my son already, like great. He's got that manipulation going in his head. Yeah.
I bought a chest of drawers. Will we get a house for it?
He told me he wanted to build a outside, like a fort outside with like a long hallway and 3 rooms.
A long hallway.
hey, man, tornadoes.
But,
You got to worry about tornadoes, you know?
Yeah, I got a little they got me a 1-speaker CD boombox, but it was just not
So
pretty.
it worked.
Exactly.
All right.
They were like,
We all assumed
look,
that there's no way that would pan out.
the sad part was it had 2 places for speakers, but Bob's parents only got him the one with the 1 speaker. in it, just to remind him, like we know the shenanigan you were trying to
and
pull.
the other side where
Right.
there was supposed to be a speaker was just a big like hot pink logo of like the maker.
Yeah. Oh, it was terrible.
had a bass boost button, just bass boost button. Remember those?
Oh yeah, that's what we're missing these days. Bass boost buttons.
I just bought a new receiver. It has the bass boost.
Oh, Joe.
There you go.
Yeah.
You were had.
Joe's still catching up, guys. Joe's still catching up.
Yeah.
It's like when you go into record now, like because when you start out, like you go in there and there's a guy who's gonna help you make it do what you wanted to do, right? I mean, you don't really get somebody with vision.
We call that the engineer, right?
Okay, thank you. I have no clue about this stuff, so this is useful. So like we wouldn't have like a producer, right? It's not. I mean, you would just go in there with a vision, and there was no one that was third party that could see it and understand it. Like, so how does that change things, right?
That never really made sense to us, though. Like, we always figured, why would you need a third party when we're the band and we're the identity of it? So just let those dynamics and politics within the band sort it out. Of course, sometimes you have a heavier-handed engineer that would sort of
Steer it.
slide over into the producer realm as well. I mean, that certainly happened early on for us.
I think a lot of young bands need that. They don't.
Yeah, they need it, but they can also extend time if you're in
Yeah.
a deal where you're paying for a studio, and that's not good.
Felt sadness on the next iteration.
I think the good thing probably about recording now, and it's the hypermobility that is there, is that you can. I think that the field recording that used to go on with a mic and a handheld tape recorder, and those now you can actually move a full rig, a rack that is capable as these studios that we were recording in with the right mics, and then you can start experiencing environments. Like if you wanted to record in this bus and really pull out what does this bus have to offer, from the sync area over there to the to the curtain, to like what's happening, and so
To what it does to your mood to be in the
what
bus.
it does
you know?
to how you feel and how your tone is with your vocals. So like The most recent for us, we've been, brilliant engineers, which I like to call like the real gunslingers that can just move quick and edit like on a dime and then keep you on your mic so you can keep in wherever you are. That for us, it's like, how do you stay in that moment? Because when you're chasing down the right take of a feeling, trying to exploit this emotion, you need to stay in it, or it just gets completely distracted. But bringing engineers to our comfort zones and our spaces seems to be working really well. So you bring them into our environment.
Yeah, no, just we're like living that moment right now, because we just, like, me and Ian showed up, and Bob's here, and we just set up a couple H6s and mics, and suddenly we can record something as good as you would have had to go into a studio to record.
Yeah, and this is more or less,
10
this
years
is
ago.
pretty close to how we would be talking in the morning. So, I mean,
Yeah, and we wouldn't be able to do that like if we would have met you somewhere else. Like this little front room of this bus with the fake wood paneling and all that. That's where these conversations happen.
We'd like to thank everyone for partaking in this today. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Hey, it's been our pleasure. Thanks for joining us
Lot of
on the
fun.
bus, man.
Come back.
Till next time.
Thank you for joining us today on The Road to Now. Our program is produced by Bob Crawford, Ben Sawyer, and Ian Scotta, edited by Bob Crawford and Ian Scotta. Paul DeFiglia provides our music. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and rate us on iTunes. For more information about this or any other episode, please visit theroadtonow.com. For Dr. Ben Sawyer, this is Bob Crawford. Take care.